Good afternoon, everyone. We're starting a little bit early. We have an enormous number of attendees today, and so we're going to give folks some time to join. Just to give you a little bit of awareness, first, I'm Danessa Knaupp. It's nice to meet you. You will be able to move me around on your screen as you see fit so that you can see the slides we're going through. We do have chat functionality in this session, but we're going to ask that you not use it. And the reason is there are so many of us that it's hard for us to really monitor chat and get through this content in a way that's really efficient for you. So we are really interested in your questions and your feedback, and we've been totally surprised and overwhelmed by the response to this webinar. So if you can jot those questions down for us and shoot them to us in response to our after webinar email, we'd really appreciate it. And we'll get those answers back to you in the most efficient and effective way possible. But we really want to make use of your precious time this afternoon and focus on how you can lead effectively through what we're all facing, which is frankly unprecedented. So we're going to spend some time talking about that this afternoon. So I'll give you all a second to get oriented as we have folks joining, and all you'll have to do is be able to hear me, so make sure your volume is on and up and be able to see the screen. And other than that, we'll take care of it on our side. Again, we are working with a huge group of attendees. We're really pleased all of you could be here, but we appreciate your grace as we navigate that as we go through. So with that, I'm going to get started. We're here today for Leading Through Crisis. I'm Danessa Knaupp. I'm the CEO of Avenue 8 Advisors. We are a leadership development and executive coaching firm based in Virginia. And we're talking through the competencies that matter most for leaders. I come to this gig pretty honestly. I spent about 20 years as a senior leader. Today, I'm a trusted advisor to C-suite and senior executives really across the nation, although my travel has been curtailed, like for many of you recently. I also have 20 years experience as a leader, so leading groups as large as several thousand through big things. What comes to mind a lot for me recently is I was a very young leader of a very large group in the days after 9/11. Now, we're fortunate that we haven't seen nearly the scale of tragedy that we have there, but some of the lessons are the same, and we'll be talking about that here. I'm also an author. I have a book that is releasing in either incredibly poor or incredibly good timing, depending on your perspective, on March 24th, called Naked at Work. You can find it on Amazon. That talks a lot about the themes we'll be seeing here. And lately, I'm a pretty frequent hand washer, as I'm sure many of you are as well. So I'm a frequent hand washer. I'm a social distancer right now. And to be really honest with you, and those of you that know me, you know there's no other way, I really despise change. And so as I've thought about so many of you in your leadership roles, I've been really in touch with how much I dislike working in a different way, having to think about all the things I don't know yet, having to account for other people working in my space or bringing their own humanity to the equation where they're worried or concerned or upset. And so we're going to talk about how do you manage all that for yourself as a leader and then manage it for your people in a way that gets folks to continue to move forward. So that's who I am. I'm delighted to be here with you today, and we're going to jump right in. The truth here is that leadership matters most now. You might have thought that leadership was a nice to have, that things were moving along nicely, and sometimes people in crisis think that leadership can sort of be put on a shelf, and really we need to do some triage work. But if you think about that metaphor, if you think about real triage, there is always one strong voice in that room. And if you're on this webinar, you are called to be that voice. And so we're going to talk about that. What I would share with you is the Greek and Roman roots of the word crisis. So often we think about mass destruction or really terrible things happening on a large scale. But the root of those words is in the idea of decision making or of a sifting and a separation. And so when I think about crisis, I think about what are we really doing to separate the important from the less important? How are we focusing on what really matters now? The truth is, we will all be defined by how we respond in the next several days, weeks, and months. You've seen whole countries be defined recently in how they responded. And the same is true for you and your organization. The beauty of it is you can choose exactly how you want to respond, and that is the legacy you will leave. So what matters most isn't even necessarily what we are doing, although to be clear, social distancing and washing our hands is exactly what we should be doing. But it's not what, but how that will matter. So as you think about how you're going to lead, I'd offer you this. There are three critical differentiators that happen and are noticed more in crisis. They're the differentiators I work with leaders on all the time, and many of you on this call are my clients in some capacity. And so you know that we talk about compassion and candor and courage. Those three things become critical differentiators in crisis. They become the things that if you think about what a leader meant to you, or how a leader took charge, or how a leader navigated uncertain waters, what you'll be thinking about is how did they pay attention to people? How did they show their humanity? How clear were they? How honest were they? And how brave were they? How did they demonstrate courage? So we're going to spend our time today in thinking about those three things, and tactically, how do you demonstrate them? How do you bring them forward in service to other people? And where have we seen examples of that so far? So we're going to be talking about compassion, candor, and courage as the three main differentiators. I want to call out, though, that to demonstrate any of these, you have to be present and visible as a leader. And many of you can probably look around an office you haven't worked in much before. So it's really hard to think about how to be present and visible when we're all social distancing, when most of us are working remotely. You can be present through technology. You can be present by checking in. I'm privileged to have a team that all checked in with me before this session pretty quickly, right? We've got text, we've got Slack, we've got email, lots of ways to talk. And so you want to think about, as we talk about these three differentiators, it's important to do them regularly and visibly with your people. And we'll talk about how to do that. So let's start with candor. Candor is about being really clear. Clear with your team about what you expect, clear with your clients about what you can deliver, and clear about what you don't know yet. And it's hard to walk a line here, right? So we have access to more media and more information than we've ever had. And so as you think about looking at all of our different input sources, it can be hard to be clear with people. It can be hard to know what to say. And so I'd offer you a couple of questions. The first is thinking about your team. When they're working flexibly, do you expect them to keep the same hours? How available do you expect them to be? We've all got kids and pets and people who don't normally come to work with us. Do you expect them to be open to having a kid walk through the background? Or is that different? What about the goals you put out there for this year? Are they the same? Have they changed? What happens if somebody in their family gets sick? How do you expect them to handle that? These may feel like a lot of overwhelming questions, but they're things for you as leader to think about. Have you been clear? Candor is so important in crisis because not only does it remove confusion, but often people need to hear you more clearly than they do in everyday operations. Think about all the things that are on your mind right now. Those of you who have children at home, those of you who have parents or loved ones in particularly sensitive groups, those of you who are trying to figure out how you're going to get different deliveries, or trying to figure out how you can work while not going mad at home, those of you who are worried about the stock market. We all have all of this stuff on our head, and it's like the volume has been turned up. Spinal Tap fans, the volume's at 11, right? Really high. And so leaders have to be in a place where they are speaking candidly because their message has a lot of background static happening. So for you, as you're moving through with your team, you want to say things clearly that perhaps you didn't say before. Like, it's okay for us to talk when you're not in full office dress on Zoom. You might assume everybody knows that, but being clear about it can help. You want to be clear with your clients too on what you can deliver. You may be able to deliver more in this environment. You may have expertise that allows you to give gifts to the world and bring forward strengths in a different way that your clients need to know about. Or you may be able to deliver less. If your work relies on you being on site, you may not be able to move at the pace you were before. And making sure that people understand that and understand it early enough so that they can adjust will go a long way towards building trust. The final one is really hard, and it's about being clear about what you don't know yet. And so that might be, I don't know what the impact will be on our staff. Here's what I know about this week. Or I don't know how long we're going to be working in an office social distancing versus working from home. It's okay to not know these things. What builds trust is to tell people you don't know. If you're debating between two things, you can say, I'm considering these two options. Here's how I'm thinking about making that decision. But you want to be really transparent with your teams because your teams will need to hear from you in a way that they can easily understand. So candor is the first competency that really matters for leaders in crisis. And I want to point out one small distinction here. Socially, when we think about candor, we worry that it's rude, that it's somehow not nice to tell somebody really plainly what we think. And what I would argue, and I'm joined by Dr. Brene Brown in this, she made this famous in one of her recent publications, but we want to think about that we're not focused on being nice. Nice is about everybody avoiding discomfort. We're focused on being really kind to each other, on giving each other the information we can, and being really honest and transparent. And so when in doubt, when you're thinking about what to communicate to your team, to your clients, or to others involved, you want to think about what's the kindest thing I can do here? What's the kindest way to be honest with them so that they can make their decisions as well? And that's how you strike a balance between over-communicating and telling everybody everything that you've ever thought on the topic and inciting worry and concern. That's not kind. And under-communicating or avoiding a difficult message. So candor is the first competency that leaders need to really focus on in crisis. I'm going to give you a minute now and have you think about what it is you need to do next with regards to candor. And there are 3 points of consideration here. We scheduled this specifically for 45 minutes to give you a little bit of a time at the top of an hour to work through what you've learned for yourself and make a leadership plan. But one of the questions I would have you take away from this portion is to think about, what do you need to be candid about and with whom right now? What's a message you should send so that whoever it is who needs to hear it is better prepared and better informed? So I'll give you a second either to jot the question or jot some ideas. But when we think about candor and being really clear, I'd like you to jot for yourself what comes up for you that you'd like to do after this session. Take just a couple of seconds and jot down that information. Those of you who decided to use this time to multitask, really you want to write it down. That reflective piece is super helpful when we think about planning in crisis. All right, so let's move to what's next. What's next here is compassion. And compassion is not about being a deep and bleeding heart. Compassion is not about sort of being the place where everybody can dump their problems and you'll carry them for them. It's not about emotional responsibility. Compassion is simply about being flexible and human. None of us a week ago thought that we would be here. No one sitting in a nursing home thought that they would have no visitors. No high school seniors or college freshmen thought that they would be stopping in the middle of these big transitions in their lives. None of us knew we would be here. And so tapping into our compassion is about remembering that all of us are experiencing this at the same time, both together and in incredibly unique personal ways. So it's both a joint experience and a deeply personal experience. And as many of you can attest, that changes and shifts by the hour in the day, by the lead news story on your phone. So compassion is about being flexible and human. As you think about how you might demonstrate compassion to your people, you might think about what do they need as the work environment shifts? So do people have what they need to work from home? Are there things you could do to make that easier? Whether it be requiring that people show up as they are when they're home and loosening that expectation. It might be that people need equipment. It might be that people need training that they didn't need before. But if you think about, if I'm going to have my team working in a different way, what will they need? It's a great way to get in touch with your compassion. They will probably need continued connection, right? So if you haven't already connected with your team in a virtual way, maybe now is the time to set up a Slack channel. Maybe now is the time to set up a daily Zoom stand-up. You want to think about, how do I foster connection? How do I foster my own sense of visibility with people? How do I show up for folks? Maybe it's blocking time in your own calendar so that you can text people at the end of the day. Your people might need an ability to deliver work flexibly in ways we haven't talked about yet. So it might be that they want to do it at different times because they've got children at home. But bringing your compassion forward and thinking, what do your people need? What can they now touch and feel as a gap that I, as their leader, can close for them? And there's a really simple answer to this. If you're sitting on this webinar thinking, I don't really know what they need, I'm not really sure, you can ask them. What would make this easier for you? There are examples all over the place of leaders doing this. So Starbucks we'll refer to probably a couple of times in this conversation. Starbucks has decided that if you need to be out for 2 weeks, we'll pay you. No questions asked. We can help. Your people might need, if they've got children at home, you have a school-age workforce, your people might need to move to a 6-hour workday for a while, or to a split shift workday for a while. Or if you have the ability, you might say, you know what, it doesn't matter to me how you work. Get the stuff done and keep yourself healthy. But thinking compassionately about, if your people are in exactly the same place we all are, which is getting new information, responding to new change. What might they need? You want to think too about how might your clients need to experience your compassion. So this shows up pretty easily and quickly in things like flexible cancellation policies. Those of you who've worked with me know that if you're a no-show within 24 hours or reschedule within 24 hours, that counts as a missed session. It doesn't right now. Nobody's got time for that. We can do that differently in this experience. Your clients might need to experience you showing up with a different set of products, bringing something forward that could be helpful to them, doing something for free that can support them. All of us have ways we can contribute here, and you can show up in a really powerful way for your clients if you think about what might they be experiencing. You'll receive a resource sheet after this in email, and in that are several companies who will help for free, who are already helping for free, will help for free as you think about communication, but really great examples of thinking about what are we really good at and how can we help people here? Thinking compassionately first. This last one is hardest for leaders, and it's hardest for leaders day to day, and it's really hard to remember right now. And that is that you are experiencing this right along with everyone else. And so your worry, your experience, your concern, your processing speed, all of that comes right into work with you. I had somebody say to me recently, you know, I really feel like I should be doing a lot more with this time. There's no excuse for me to sit in this house all day and not get all of these house projects done. And I can see that. Right? It's a little bit like the character in Orange is the New Black when she's going to prison for a year for a misdemeanor, and she says, I'm going to use that year to really tone up and get fit and read. And by the end of the episode, she's shaking and crying and she's in this whole new world, and none of that is going to happen. The compassion that you can show yourself as a leader is an understanding that what you've done up until now is all through enormous disruption. I'd argue even your morning routine is enormously disrupted. And so all the things that are on autopilot for you, when you go to the gym, when you work out, how you get your groceries, how you respond to clients, how you sell, how you work, how you solve problems, all of that is different. So it's a little bit like you have over the years built a support system that makes you able to multitask and do lots and lots of things easily. When that infrastructure is pulled away or shaken up, each one of those things you do, even though it may be fairly simple, your morning routine may be fairly simple, you're doing the same things getting ready for work, but your work is in a different place. You're eating different kinds of food, you're drinking different kinds of coffee, you're interacting with different levels of people, and oh, by the way, all of those people are on high alert, as they used to say on 7/11, excuse me, on Saturday Night Live in the years after 9/11. If you're working with all of that, that requires more energy of you. So the compassion you can show to yourself is to understand that you are already processing an enormous amount of change and disruption, whether you feel it or not. And so there are going to be some days where the most you can do is get through the day without losing your marbles. And that's okay. That's a successful day some days. And there are going to be other days where you have far more energy. One of the most critical skills now, and the most critical skills as we think about the future of work, which this is great practice for, right, is emotional intelligence. And the foundation of emotional intelligence is understanding your own emotional experience. and being able to manage that and being able to bring it forward in service to others when it makes sense. So if anything else, on a day when everything goes wrong and you feel like you're not productive at all, you at the very least have been in touch with your own experience and have a keen awareness of what everyone around you is feeling. So many of you are really high achievers. So many of you really understand what you want. And you go for it and you get it. You're used to sort of setting the goal and checking the box. Those times will come again. But we're a beginner at this. We're all beginners at this. We haven't done this before. And so allowing yourself some grace and compassion to move through it is critically important. So when you think about compassion, you want to think about compassion for your team. What do they need? How can you show up? Compassion for others around you, your clients and your partners, and compassion for yourself. And that does not mean that we're going to hold hands and sing campfire songs. It doesn't mean, again, we're taking emotional responsibility. We're simply acknowledging that the mental load of the work we're doing today is vastly heavier than it was last week. So I'm going to give you a moment to consider what you need to do first to exercise and think consciously about compassion. I'll give you a minute to jot that down. You've addressed the question on candor. And now you're thinking about to bring forward my compassion, whether it be for myself or for others. What do I have to do? All right. Next, we're going to talk about courage. Courage is about being brave and bold. I don't mean bold in a peacock way. I don't mean bold in an uninformed way. I mean bold in an aspirational way. So how do we think about bringing forward our courage, acknowledging where we are and moving forward in the way that we know to be best right then? Takes courage. These are uncertain times. Remembering that uncertain doesn't mean unsafe takes courage. We're going to talk about how you bring that forward. First, this is an unprecedented opportunity to innovate and create. And let me be really clear here. This is not about capitalizing on catastrophe. So this is not about hoarding hand sanitizer. Hopefully you saw what happened to the folks who did that in Middle America. This isn't about price gouging. This is about understanding how am I uniquely positioned to contribute? How can I help? This is the biggest exercise in community empathy that we will have in a generation. Understanding how we can work together, understanding that what we do, even if it feels small, has deep and powerful ripple effects for others. And so when you think about that from a strategic standpoint for your business, you want to think about how can we contribute in a different way? The data again and again shows that massive disruption, catastrophe even, is one of the biggest origins of creativity and innovation. So many of you have heard me speak about failure and that opportunity that it presents. Some of you may have read in my upcoming book, the chapter on innovation and creativity. This is what we're talking about. My favorite news story that has emerged already is the perfume factory that has shifted to creating hand sanitizer. That is a beautiful example of a nimble shift of an organization to thinking about how can we innovate and create in a way that adds value. So how do we empower the team? How do we let the team think about what they might do? Now is the time for longer leashes, if you have leashes at all, right? Now is the time for letting people really think about what they see as a need and how they can fill it. How might you think about that for the market? That's another really important situation. What do we have? What do we know? And how can we apply that? There's great opportunity there. And then what new awareness do you have today that you didn't have last week? Man, there's so much of it, right? We can all define social distancing now. We all know exactly how long to wash our hands. That's really useful information. But you have really critical, specific job knowledge, understanding of your industry that other people don't. And you likely have new awareness in that same way. And thinking about how you can bring it forward in service to others will create an enormous impact. So don't lose sight of the opportunity here. Again, I'm not talking about opportunity to line your pocket. I'm talking about opportunity to contribute to our overall well-being. Don't put your head down. Look up and around. Think about what you can do differently. There's lots of opportunities to do that. And you have everything you need with your specific job knowledge and your ability to identify that and apply it in this changing world. You want to think about how you can build trust now too. What will be most important over the coming weeks and months and any time we're in a crisis is that your people trust you, that they believe you have their best interests at heart. There are three kinds of trust at play at work. There's interpersonal trust. You and I trust each other. There's organizational trust. I trust that the systems in place will protect us. That's part of why people are so worried here is we've had a lot of organizational trust in our medical system, and now we're understanding that that may be different than we thought. So that's part of the unsettlement. You can apply that to the unsettling idea of when organizational trust falls through. And then there's strategic trust. How do I trust our leadership to move us through here? Your position gives you incredible power over all three. When your people feel safe, and not safe from the outside world, but safe in what you can define for them as their role, they will be able to innovate and move forward. And so you want to think about, how can I help people? How can I be bold? One of the bold suggestions I have for our health system is, you know that we will need nurses and doctors, and we know that nurses are underpaid. What would it look like if we doubled pay for nurses? What would it look like if we got bold with our promises to people? Here's another place where Starbucks is an example, right? Bold in their promise, even when they know not how it's going to affect them. Somebody somewhere ran a projection on that, and it could be, oh, everybody stays home or nobody stays home. There's no way to make that decision based on data. Data is important, but you want to think about, how do you build trust? You can wow your clients. You can do something totally differently. And you can support your community and your partners. There's a great example right here in Richmond with Mark Smith of Midas of Richmond, who is taking the opportunity to send oil changes to people's houses. You can get your car serviced, they can come that way. They can come out to you. That's a wildly different model. And it's probably not perfect. I know Mark well, we haven't talked about this topic, but it's probably not perfect, but that's okay. We felt the same way with this webinar, right? It's not perfect to do it for the enormous number of attendees that we expect. We may run into some flubs. That's okay. The overall value is enough. And so it allows us to be bold. So I'd encourage you to think about, what can you do that is bold and allows you to build trust? Last question I'd have you think about is, what opportunity do you have now to inspire courage? How can you help your teams be bold and brave? So I'll give you a second to jot that down. Many of you are probably thinking that There is so much on the to-do list, it's hard to make time and space for work like this. And you're right. It's hard to think about these extra things when our everyday work has gotten so complicated and our resources to deliver our everyday work are so constrained, both in our attention and our energy. So it's a little bit like we're going to do X and our ability to do X just decreased and the stakes on X just increased. That's exactly what's happening to us here. It's a unique opportunity, and it's also a difficult dive. What I'd argue is that spending time like this, committing to conversations and thinking about how will I lead, what's important, what you do with your answers to these 3 questions will make a lasting difference for your team. We will feel these ripple effects for a long time. We will all remember this. My hope is that we don't have a singular flashbulb like so many of us do if we're old enough of 9/11. But we will feel this for long times to come. And you get to choose what those ripple effects are. You get to define today, moving forward, the story your team and the people surrounding you will tell. My leader was present. My leader was honest. My leader understood what I was going through. My leader made big moves to support us. Those stories don't end badly. And so even though we are in a place of deep uncertainty, we are not unsafe. We have lots we can control as leaders. And the ripple effect of that is exponential math I want to do. So many of our media articles now are showing us the exponential math of the spread of the virus. The math that I would put out there is that each of you have an opportunity to influence hundreds of people through your ability to stay calm, present, and connected, and your ability to demonstrate courage and candor and compassion. My offer to you is that we will help you. So we will continue to give you information like this. We will continue to be really focused on your time so that we're not distracting. We'll make sure that we can add to the conversation in a way that makes you understand that you have a partner in this. And there are lots of other organizations as well. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to use some of the time you'd allocated to this webinar today to think about, what do I want my leadership legacy to be? What do I want people to say when they talk about how we managed through this? By the way, this can apply not only to work, but to home, right? How do I want to emerge from this and to set that intention? And then think about, what do I need to do first in each of these areas to begin? You don't have to do it all today. You just need to do the next piece of it today. So I'd leave you with the thought that courage, candor, and compassion will make all of the difference for your people. We have coming out to you a worksheet that will give you information, other firms that can help support, other tactical resources that can help you. My information is on it. My team's information is on it. We will continue to help you. So reach out with your questions, reach out with your specific situations. We are happy to help. It feels like a lot, but you are not alone. We are in it together. I'd really appreciate your feedback on this. This is the first thing we've done like this, so you'll receive an email right afterwards asking you for 30 seconds of your time, and I would bet most of you can beat that buzzer. But if you can give us 30 seconds of your time and tell us your feedback, reach out and tell us what else you need. How could we make this better? How could we make it a more effective use of your time? What else do you need? We will stand beside you and deliver that. I hope that each of you is off to a productive day. I hope that you've washed your hands, and I hope that the only people you see today are the ones you love in your house and the ones on video. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. I hope you have a good afternoon.